Adam, thank you for that introduction, and thank you to the British Chamber of Commerce for inviting me to speak to you again today. This is an important conference on a crucial subject, business and education, which goes to the heart of building that better economy which we all know is not only possible but necessary if we're all to be able to thrive. During the general election campaign, I travelled to every single part of Britain. I did 100 events all around the country, campaigning for real change in Britain on the basis of a very popular manifesto. And that manifesto offered hope to millions of people and won support from every region and every nation of the UK. Our manifesto offered a comprehensive plan for a new direction in our economy, based around investment in the economy and the jobs of the future, and the public services that sustain them, and a new settlement with business that would benefit you and the whole country. It is that programme of change which won a huge increase in Labour support, the biggest increase in Labour support since 1945. And that means that we're not just the official opposition, but a government in waiting. So we need to be engaged and in dialogue about the country's future far more closely than we've ever been before, and we intend to be, which is one of the reasons I'm so pleased to be invited here today to be able to share these thoughts with you. Britain has been living through a lost decade, a decade of lost growth, a decade of stagnant living standards, a decade when investment and productivity fell so far that it takes a worker 5 days to produce what takes 4 days in Germany or France. This country cannot afford another lost decade. We have investment levels that are described by the Governor of the Bank of England as markedly weak. We have productivity that lags far behind our main competitors, and that fell further behind on yesterday's official statistics. We have an explosion of low-paid, insecure jobs, and the Bank of England's chief economist has now said that 7% of the entire workforce could be on 0-hours contracts within a decade. We've had a period of lost wage growth and falling real terms pay that the Institute of Fiscal Studies describes as completely unprecedented. We have unsecured household debt rising to record levels. And now we have economic growth that has slowed to just 0.2% in the latest quarter, the worst of the G7 group of countries. It's against this backdrop that Labour set out our vision to change our society and invest in our economy, to build a strong, sustainable economy in which no region or nation of the UK is left behind. Please understand the enormous levels of regional disparity that exist across Britain, and if we don't address those, then the situation will become far worse. We want everyone to share in the wealth that we all create together. At the heart of that vision has to be education. Education must be at the heart of the drive to raise productivity, increase our economic dynamism, and allow our businesses to compete on the world stage. Investing in our education system will be central to halting the spread of low-paid, low-skilled, insecure work by providing the skilled workforce that businesses need if they are to create high-skilled, better-paid jobs. And there is a payback for government too, in creating a labour market where work pays with higher revenues from income tax and national insurance and lower payments in tax credits and housing benefit. Education allows individuals to realise their full potential and participate fully in our economy and society. But if education is to bring those benefits, we need an education system that responds to the needs of the economy and which allows people to make a smooth transition from education to the workplace. This is something that we, the next Labour government, business and educators need to do together in partnership. Working together on this is vital, and by being here today, I know that you recognise that, and I thank you all for coming. And I know there are many great initiatives already happening. From the Young Chamber Initiative, for example, which allows schools and colleges to tap into expertise of business and prepare their students for the world of work, to the many excellent work experience programmes and careers advice services provided by our education institutions. But government also has a vital role to play. So let me set out what a Labour government would do. There are no shortcuts. If we are to create a high-skilled, high-wage and high-productivity economy, we're going to have to invest more to upgrade our economy for the 21st century. And that will mean businesses paying a bit more tax to invest in education while still maintaining low tax rates by historical and international comparisons. We know that early years education plays an absolutely crucial role in attainment and cognitive development. What happens preschool is absolutely essential to the life chances of a child in primary, secondary and after that. And so I take very seriously the need to invest in preschool education as well as obviously in our schools. So in our schools that children become young adults ready to face the world. Our universities are the birthplace of the ideas and inventions that will define our economy and society in the 21st century. And that education now has to continue throughout people's lives to allow us all to grow and develop and meet the needs of a rapidly changing economy. People's needs change throughout their lives, and also the skills they offer often vary a great deal during their working life. That's why our manifesto set out plans to build a national education service, providing lifelong education and training free at the point of use for every single person in this country. Our National Education Service will be a key institution for fairness and prosperity in the 21st century, just as the National Health Service, which had its 69th birthday yesterday, transformed people's prospects in the 20th century and brought relatively good health to the entire country compared to what was there before. We believe education is a public good, that businesses, large and small, prosper when education, skills and training are given laser-like attention by a committed government. And individuals benefit too, bringing them opportunities they wouldn't possibly otherwise have. Through our National Education Service, we will extend 30 hours of free childcare to all 2 to 4-year-olds, our commitment to preschool, and unlike the Conservative government, we will put the funding in place to make sure that we actually deliver on our promises. And by making the transition to a supply-side system and a graduate-led workforce, we'll give every child access to high-quality early years education that research shows is crucial to educational attainment and social capabilities later in life. This won't be achieved overnight. It will be part of a 5-year programme to develop higher quality universal childcare for 2, 3 and 4-year-olds. We'll properly fund our schools. We now have an utterly unacceptable situation in which schools are being forced to beg parents for donations just to cover basic costs or even shorten the school day so they can pay their staff. And we'll scrap the public sector pay cap that, along with rising stress levels, is causing good teachers to leave the profession, leading to recruitment and a serious retention crisis. But equipping children for the world of work is not just about the necessary funding for schools. In the age of the 4th industrial revolution, employers deciding who to hire do not look for automons. They're looking for people with soft skills that keep every business going and the creativity that helps firms to innovate and grow. That's why the next Labour government will reverse the narrowing of the curriculum that's taken place under this government, including a new arts pupil premium to give every child access to the arts and music, and will put more trust in teachers' professionalism and experience by giving them more of a say in how children are taught. We need to encourage the creativity that's there in every child, not suppress it. We'll also consult on introducing teacher sabbaticals and placements in industry as a way to encourage interaction between education and business and to introduce broad experiences into the classroom. I've often been impressed by teachers who've come to the profession later in life, having worked in other sectors, and their experience benefits their teaching. I remember in one primary school I visited in my constituency, one of the best teachers was somebody who had previously been a telephone engineer and decided to become a teacher much later on. He had a very practical, very inspirational approach towards his pupils, which I was really impressed by. And I think this interaction between businesses and schools can be something where you bring in a whole lot more people into teaching, which is good. You may well have heard that we've promised also to scrap university tuition fees. Well, you must have heard about it because everybody talked about it. And to reintroduce maintenance grants, I hope you heard about that one as well, for students from low-income households. Graduates now due to leave university with £57,000 worth of debt that will last a lifetime. We risk deterring working class students, leaving talent wasted and potential untapped. Not everybody can access the bank of mum and dad to go to university. Our plans for a high-skill, high-productivity economy rely on a large graduate workforce, and that means no one should be discouraged from going to university because of debt. Our universities are among the very best in the world, but while they are the birthplace of many world-changing ideas, it's all too common for those ideas to be taken up and commercialised by businesses based in other countries. We want to work with you to bridge this gap between innovation and product building links between universities and business and ensure that the benefits of Britain's great research centres are not halted at the walls of the ivory tower. There are some universities that are very good at incubating businesses around their campuses, very good at interaction with them, but too many of those businesses have a great problem of accessing any capital to develop, and so they remain very small or just sell their ideas on to somebody else. It's a similar story from our great universities and what they produce. World-leading universities are spread across the country from St Andrews to Exeter. But, and I emphasised this earlier, the regional imbalances in our economy means a disproportionate number of graduates seek to build their adult lives in London. This is a great loss to the local economy and to the rest of the country and its potential for economic development. That's why we're committed to a national investment bank accompanied by a network of regional development banks to ensure that every region and nation of the UK has a strong economy. So we'll use a £250 billion National Transformation Fund to boost and rebalance investment across the country, creating economic opportunities for all. You all know the figures. It's far too much concentration of capital investment in London and the South East, far too little North East, North West and East Midlands, as well as the nations of Scotland and Wales. Technological change, from automation to decarbonisation, that means many jobs and industries will disappear or shrink in the coming years and decades. And I'm not one of the doom mongers who believe that it will all inevitably herald an era of mass unemployment. At every stage of economic and industrial history, jobs, industries and skills have been lost, replaced and transformed. But whether that happens at huge social cost, as it did, for example, in the very early days of the Industrial Revolution, and people in desperation opposed mechanisation and opposed bringing in of machines because they got no benefit from it. They only got disaster from it, being forced off the land or forced into urban living, which they didn't want to go to. They were known as the Luddites. And the benefits were not embraced by everybody. So it does mean managing and planning technological change for the future. We can't simply leave it to the market. So we need strong public institutions, public investment and public enterprise to work with business to manage the social and economic effects of rapid technological change or deindustrialisation that's taken place in many parts of the country, so that it benefits the many, not just a few people. We need to ensure that everyone, workers, government and businesses, share in the benefits of that new technology can bring. As with every other technological revolution, disappearing jobs will be replaced by new, as yet unforeseen forms of work. There will be churn, as these new forms of work will often require a different set of skills to those that they replace. This means that we will need to invest in a step change in skills and training to upgrade the skills of the existing workforce and make sure everyone is able to retrain at any point in their life to meet the changing needs of the economy. That's why a Labour government has made a flagship commitment to make all further education courses free at the point of use for everyone at any stage in their lives. There's been quite a lot of focus on our policy to scrap university tuition fees, which now appears to be under consideration by the government, or at least some members of it. But perhaps of even greater significance, and certainly less discussion, is our policy to scrap fees for adult education courses in colleges too. Vocational training has long been the poor relation in our education system. Successive governments have paid lip service to the desire to achieve parity of esteem between academic and technical education, while leaving the deep-rooted historical snobbishness of Britain's two-tier education system absolutely fully intact. One thing I'm passionate about, as the child and sibling of engineers, is the development of engineering and science skills, which have to start earlier. Before children get to secondary school, we all have a role in tackling the gender imbalance in STEM subjects. It means encouraging all children to think how things work, how things are made, from the very earliest days in primary school. That will encourage their natural inquisition and imagination in the future. So we want to correct the historic neglect of the further education sector by finally giving it the investment in teachers and facilities it deserves, giving college lecturers greater job security, making all courses free at the point of use to ensure the sector continues to be a world-leading provider of adult and vocational education, meeting the skills and needs of their local economies. Right now we have a government that often behaves as if all businesses want is lower wages, that thinks jobs should be measured by quantity rather than quality, and that reckons competitiveness is simply a matter of driving down costs. As I hope I've managed to make clear, this is not Labour's view or a vision of the future that we share. We want to use our myriad of talents and resources to make Britain the most prosperous and dynamic economy that we can in the world. A Labour government will invest in the future, both in our physical infrastructure and in our workforce. Our business team, led by Rebecca Long-Bailey, is developing plans to develop a game-changing industrial strategy that will rebalance our economy and drive up the quality of work across all sectors. Our education team, led by Angela Rayner, will be setting out more detailed proposals to invest in a national education service, and we look forward to your views on how we will develop that. This is designed to equip our workforce with the skills they need to do in those jobs. I've set out the framework for what a Labour government would do, but turning that vision into practice cannot be a job of government alone. Making our plans a reality will require the collaboration of everyone here today, businesses, educators and politicians. That's why I want to end with a final pledge. A Labour government will trust in your experience, listen to your expertise and work with you in partnership to create an education system that delivers for our economy, an economy that works for all, not just a few people. That's the challenge we all face. That's the challenge I'm absolutely up for, and I look forward to hearing your views and your participation as we develop the details of our policies. Thank you very much for inviting me today.
Jeremy, I believe we have time for a couple of questions. I think you stay there. And I'd like to take two from the audience. Lady just here, and the gentleman just here, and I'll take two more from this side if I can as well. I have two more. Lady just here, and gentleman at the back. Okay, I'll take them in that order. Please give us your name, rank, and serial number first. Lady just here, thank you.
Hello, it's Fleur Sexton from PetXI Training, based in Coventry. It was really, really interesting hearing what you said, and absolutely fantastic vision. I just want to ask, how do you see the private sector working with public sector through the education? How would you see that panning out?
Okay, we'll come back to that one. Then the next one was the gentleman just here. White shirt, glasses.
Good morning, Carl Ward, Association of School and College Leaders President next year. and serving head teacher. Quick question, 5 years...
You make it sound like you're in the army, serving head teacher.
Right, yeah, serving head teacher, quite exactly. 5 years is a real commitment to working with business and education and, of course, with politicians. But my experience is that 5 years doesn't make a plan. Will you consider making sure that we work together on a non-ended plan? So we take policy away from just politicians and give it to business and education, and we work together to create that policy in future.
Thank you, Carl. Just here.
I'm Janet Clark from the Association of Teachers and Lecturers. The current government has prioritised the number of apprenticeship starts over quality. What would a Labour government do to ensure the quality of apprenticeship programmes?
Thank you. And gentleman just at the back. One of our press tables, please.
Thank you. I'm Ben Glaze from the Daily Mirror. 2 questions, if I may, sorry. One is on the...
You're a journalist, it's allowed.
Thank you. One's on the pledge to raise corporation tax. This will come at the same time as Emmanuel Macron is lowering corporation tax in France. So I'm just wondering what you would say to companies who might threaten to relocate across the Channel. And also, I'm just wondering what you make of Sir John Chilcott's remarks this morning that Tony Blair wasn't straight with people in the run-up to the Iraq War.
I think we'll leave the second one and concentrate on the first, Ben. That's the chair's prerogative. But let's come back to the first question from our colleague from Pixie over here. Private sector working with the public sector, Jeremy. This question about how it works in practice, I think.
How it works in practice has to be involvement in the management and running of colleges. Most colleges do have local businesses on the boards of the colleges, and at their best they play a very constructive role in it. They give good advice, and they do give really serious good advice about the kind of skill sets that are needed. And I've been happy to work very closely with FE colleges in my own constituency and gain quite a good understanding of how it works from there. It's also a question of procurement policies. Government and local government as a whole spend about £200 billion a year on procuring services from the private sector. I think those procurement services can be a motor for good employment. They can be a motor for good quality training. And so that, for example, if a local authority is letting out large contracts to a building company, it's often the case already, they would insist that a local construction does include apprentices, does include local employment, does include skill development, so the local community develop from it. And I think that's a perfectly reasonable thing to do, and we would certainly want to make that more effective, both in central government as well as in local governments. Their participation has to be there at a local level, and actually the local chambers of commerce can be quite effective as a means of communicating with local government, local NHS, as well as appropriate regional offices of central government. So I see the participation there as a constructive one, but it's a two-way process, and that means we would be strongly encouraging living wage payment, as well as the issues I mentioned about training, and also particularly in construction and delivery of services, the use of locally employed labour, which help to develop the local economy.
Jeremy, thank you. Carl's point really is about stability. It's the same thing we say in business on government policies. It takes businesses a year to hear about something, 5 years to start to engage with it, and 10 years to feel comfortable with it. I'm sure it's the same in the education sector. It all changes too much. How do we get stability so we can deliver for the future?
I thought you were about to say that politicians only think in 4-year terms, actually.
Sometimes they think in terms of minutes, don't they?
Yeah, I mean, it's a fair point that the political cycle, which is the maximum length of a parliament, which is 5 years, tends to dominate an awful lot of political thinking, and for obvious reasons, because nothing concentrates the minds of politicians more than any upcoming election. But it does mean that sometimes longer-term decisions are delayed or not taken, because if you think of major investment decisions in industry, they're not taken for 5 years, they're taken for 10, 20 or 30 years. So for example, if an aircraft engine manufacturer is developing a new engine, take Rolls-Royce Trent for example, that is a 20 to 30 year program before the whole thing comes to fruition, or it would still be in use in that time. That's a very long-term investment. And the same applies to so much else, and which is why we discussed this quite a lot and felt that the best way of looking at education rather than just on the short term was to set up a national education service which would look at the totality of education, achievements in education, problems in education, and also take longer term advice. And so a national education service, and I use the rough parallel of the National Health Service, which then has a longer term idea of how we would look at the issues of underachievement in schools, look at the issues of poverty-related underachievement in schools, and look at the question of investment, particularly in preschool. I'm very passionate about this. You might think it's almost bordering on going over the top. I don't believe it is, because if you look at the attainment levels of children in our society, it's a very sad fact that you can almost look at the postcode where they're born and work out roughly where they're going to end up later on in life. And that's wrong. All children deserve a decent chance, and that means we've got to be prepared to focus investment, in some cases in greater proportions, in the poorest parts of the country and the poorest wards in the country. And that is what a national education service would be able to do, slightly separate from day-to-day political considerations. So that's the area we're looking at. And genuinely, I look forward to any views you want to put forward to us on how we develop this national education service. We have a manifesto in which we fought the election, which is obvious, you've seen it. I'm now asking all of my shadow teams to develop the detail of how they would take it forward, and that obviously includes the National Education Service.
Jeremy, thank you. On to Janet's question about apprenticeship quality versus quantity. We want parity of esteem, all of us in the room, because a lot of employers say we want the best candidate for the job. We don't actually care which route they come through. We just want to know that that's delivered us what we need. Are we focusing too much on quantity and not enough on quality?
I get this. First of all, I want there to be parity of esteem between a good apprenticeship and doing an FE or higher education course or a degree, because at their best, some colleges do merge the two things together. I was very impressed with Blackburn College, for example, which brings in students, some of whom are not doing terribly well at the ages of sort of 16, 17, brings them into college and can help them develop the skills that they didn't necessarily achieve when they should have done at secondary school, take them through it. And they have a partnership with the University of Lancaster, so a number of them actually end up 4 or 5 years later with a degree or a very high level of vocational qualification, because they had a college that was focused on what they were doing. Blackburn is an example, because I visited there and was very impressed with what they're doing. It's not the only one. There are many others around the country who do similar things to that. There is also, at the other end of the scale, a question about the quality of some of the apprenticeships that are on offer and the degree of inspection that goes on with them. And I would look to a national education service to make sure that the apprentices are getting the support and training that they need, are getting good quality training, and are also, when they're on release into college, getting experience of wider subjects and wider skill sets. Very good college I visited in Consett. I was very impressed with that. It was wholly focused on the building industry, but was bringing in a lot of students and giving them very high levels of skill training as a result of a college totally focused on that subject. So a National Education Service would also need to be monitoring the efficiency, effectiveness and skills required for all apprenticeships, because some are absolutely excellent, some I would be slightly sceptical of.
Okay, let's take Ben's final question, which really is about the business environment, corporation tax. If you would put it up, something that of course my chambers and business members are not too keen on, as you'd expect.
I thought you welcomed it. I thought you welcomed it.
And Mr Macron is thinking of putting it down. Now, we've got Brexit ahead of us. We've tried to steer clear of that today, but unless we have the best possible environment here in the UK to do business, we can't make much of a success of Brexit, can we? So, really, is raising corporation tax a good idea?
Well, in 2010, the corporation tax was at 28%. It's now come down quite a lot. We would put it back up to 26%, because we think that is a figure that will be able to fund what we're trying to achieve, which is mainly in education, not exclusively, but mainly in education. And we think it is the right thing to do. If we don't do that and continue with the idea that students have to go massively into debt in order to become graduates, that people cannot go into nursing because they lost the nurse bursary unless they've got private means to do it, and so on, we end up with a less skilled, less qualified workforce if we are prepared as a public to invest in it, then we end up with a better qualified workforce. Individual attainments are higher because obviously the people are qualified and therefore probably better able to get good jobs. But we also lose out as a society if we don't have a highly qualified workforce. Now, I understand the argument about businesses relocating elsewhere, and President Macron is apparently going to propose some reductions in corporation tax. I'm not quite sure what level he's going to reduce it to, but I think we should be prepared to raise it to what would still be a lower level than the average of the G7 as a way of investing in our future in education, as well as the infrastructure and other investments that I put forward. I don't see a future for this country of being a sort of low-tax haven on the shores of Europe. I see the future of this country as one that has a close partnership with the European Union, a tariff-free trade access to Europe, and a similarity in taxation levels, and it won't be that different to others. And as I said, the 26 figure that I put is lower than the G7 average at the present time. Now, the temptation by lots of governments is, well, if you lower tax at this level, then on a short-term basis an industry will locate there and you'll benefit from it. The country may then find it cannot sustain its public services, so we'll have to raise tax. Do the businesses then leave? I think you have to have some degree of certainty and confidence for the future, and that's why we are looking to this kind of economic stroke education model for the future of this country. We're very serious about investment for our future. We cannot go on with these levels of regional disparity. We cannot go on with the underfunding of so many of our public services, and we cannot go on loading every generation with debts of £50,000 or £60,000, which at some point it's going to get so serious there will be a shortage of people to go to university because they simply can't countenance the idea of that level of debt. The result is we all lose.
I sense in that the seeds of much more debate between business communities and the party over time.
Absolutely.
Over the coming months.
Absolutely.
And we welcome that conversation. Jeremy, thank you very much for being with us today. We're very grateful for you for taking the time out. Ladies and gentlemen, please thank
Thank
Jeremy
you very
Corbyn.
much.
Thank you so much. Good to see you.